everyone, and welcome to another creepypasta reading. Today we'll be reading a creepypasta about the Amazing World of Gumball called The Grieving. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started. I've always loved Cartoon Network as a kid, and as I was growing up, it was like my all-time favorite channel to watch. Even today it has some good shows like Adventure Time and Regular Show. One of the newest shows on the network, The Amazing World of Gumball, is a cute and mildly entertaining show. Not really my favorite, but my little brother seems to love it. One night I was watching Adult Swim when I realized that I'd been up so late, I haven't even kept track of the time. It was already 4 in the morning. I don't even remember watching Adult Swim this late, so I stayed awake to see what would happen when it ended. A little bumper came up showing at the bottom of the screen during a commercial break. It said that a special episode of The Amazing World of Gumball was about to air. I was a little confused about an episode of a very popular new show coming on this early, but I was bored and decided I would watch it, thinking it might come on later in the day so I could spoil it for my brother. You know, the flashy and energetic intro theme played, although it was a little bit different than I recalled. The music was a lot different and the show's logo was not animated. Its colors were done rather sloppily as well, almost like someone a little kid would have done on a board. I ignored it, assuming that it was just done for the special episode. The title of the episode was called The Grieving. Sort of a sad title, but I didn't really pay too much attention. It began with Gumball standing alone facing a corner of his dimly lit classroom. He looked very miserable, far city from the cheerful of demeanor he usually had. There was no one else in the room, not even his best friend, and the windows in the room clearly showed the night sky outside. I was really starting to get confused. Why would he be at school all night? And why was he standing in the corner? After about what seemed like a minute of Gumball standing somberly in the corner, the scene suddenly changed. We were in Gumball's house. Once again, the scene is silent and a little creepy. Richard, Gumball's father, walks in from the kitchen. He looks even more miserable than Gumball had in the previous scene. Richard isn't wearing his usual suit and tie. He's dressed in a fancy black suit, a little uncharacteristic as him, as he's usually a Slav. He sighs and falls onto the sofa and starts sobbing intensely, sounding like someone who had just lost something very important. I was starting to get a little creeped out. Where was the silly, fun cartoon I would usually look forward to watching with my younger brother? This is something entirely different. I was beginning to think that this might have been something the creators did as an experiment. At least a test of the animation or sound perhaps, though it could have been. Aside from the opening theme, which was still different from the final shows, the episode had been much quieter than it usually was, only subtle sounds and very little music, as the animation was not anything to write home about either. Was it done by like an amateur flash on Newgrounds? The character designs were somewhat sloppy and rushed, and the real-life background used for the show looked different. As confused as something, frightened as I was, for some reason I kept watching it. Richard was still crying on the sofa, as the front door opened suddenly, making me jump a bit at such a loud noise, and Gumball's mother stepped in. Just like Richard, she wasn't wearing his usual outfit. For some reason, she was in a black dress and was wearing a hat. Nicole sat down on the couch to comfort her husband, although she was looking a bit saddened by herself. By this point, Richard's crying is beginning to get more pained and miserable sounding. This wasn't the normal cartoon crying. This was realistic and almost depressing. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the sad scene at their home ended. As it shifted back to the school, we weren't in Gumball's classroom this time. We were in Principal Brown's office. Nicole and Richard were there, in their usual clothes, looking more normal and happy than they had, but slightly worried. Principal Brown, however, looked very sad. He quietly and somberly informed them that their children, Anais and Darwin, were not present at their lunch after that day. they hadn't been seen at the rest of the day. Nicole was insanely furious at him. She began spouting various fucks and calls at him, and I don't think it would have made it on a more mature program. Like a regular show, I was laughing at this because it seemed sort of funny for Nicole to flip out in a manner and start swearing like a sailor in a G-rated cartoon. But my outlook soon changed when Principal Brown told her something else after she finally had quieted down. His eyes began to tear up as he informed them that they eventually were found, but they had not been found alive. He then went into graphic detail and nearly nauseating detail describing how their bodies were found, their parents sitting in utter shock. I could hardly believe what was happening. How could such a cheery and fun kids show be taking to such a dark, twisted turn? I was considering turning the TV off, but I was too scared to be left in the dark now, nearly frozen by fear and disturbedly intensely at the terrible things that he was saying. Another flashback. The scene was earlier that day, and the animation of the scene was even worse than earlier. I don't remember it clearly, but I think his recollection by saying that the school had called the police department when they first turned up missing. I believe that the kids had simply ran off and decided to skip school. They said it was very uncharacteristic of both Darwin and Anais to go skipping school like delinquents. Darwin was a little naive and a bit stupid, but he was a good kid and would never have dreaming of doing something like that, and Anais was even less likely to run away. She was a straight A student, being only a 4, which also troubled the police, seeing as a defenseless 4-year-old girl was missing as well as an older boy. The school had been thoroughly checked, and the police started to search the heavily wooded area outside of the school. It took little for the police to discover the horrifying fate of Anais. It's a small clearing outside of the school. Anais's head was found in a small box. You likely would have expected something like that to be shown in the cutesy art style, but it was nothing like that at all. Realistic blood covered the box, inside and out, while Anais's head was done in the normal style, but was drenched in blood and other fluids. But not all theirs. Apparently, there was a note in the box, seemingly written in her blood. It was never stated during the episode what exactly was written on the note, but apparently it led to the rest of the remains in Darwin's heavily mutilated corpse. What I remember most about this scene was how out of place it seemed. All the blood and gore from Darwin and Anais's slaughtered and dismembered remains was done in a very realistic and disturbing way. It looked like the scene had been taken from a crime scene photograph done by a professional, not something from a cartoon. The way this scene was animated was different from most of the show as well. You may not know that the characteristics from this scene are done in a vastly different animation style, from flash animation to CGI. And I think there's even a character done by someone putting their chin upside down to make it look like a face. This particular scene wasn't like anything I'd ever seen on the show before. Every little detail of Darwin's face was clearly illustrated. He looked like a zombie. His face was very pale, and his eyes had been gouged out by someone. Anais fared no better, or what was left of her. She was naked, and her stomach had been slit open. Her intestines were stretched around the trees and bushes in the woods, done once again in a very morbid and realistic style. I was fearing very ill this time, which is incredibly disturbing. Flashback had come to an end, so I quickly ran to the bathroom to throw up. I was feeling better after throwing up, so I'd realized that I had good timing and run to the bathroom during commercial. It was then that I noticed the show had been running twice as long. It usually ran for 11 minutes. The episode was running for about 30, but then I was still wondering if there was any information in the grieving. So while the commercials were still playing, I looked up some information about this episode on Google. Nothing came up. No information remotely similar to the plot. The name of this episode existed anywhere. Now incredibly scared and wondering if anyone else was watching, I quickly dialed my brother and asked him to turn on Cartoon Network and see if he was seeing the same shit that I was. He was pretty mad that I woke him up this hour, but he's a nice person and told me he would see. I thanked him and stayed on the line as the show came back from commercial break. The scene had thankfully panned away from the horrific sight of the children mutilated and was back to the principal's office. I asked Larry if he saw some cartoon animals talking or crying. since that was what they were doing on my TV. To my surprise, he said he saw nothing like that. Instead, it was a rerun of an old Looney Tunes short. In utter shock, I dropped my phone and ran over to the TV to turn it off as hard as I could. I pressed the buttons. It would not shut off at all. I tried every single button, and none of that did a thing. I tried unplugging the whole thing as well, but nothing worked. The TV stayed on, no matter what. Larry had hung up, assuming that I was playing a joke or something, I guess, and I was all alone once again. My door was locked from the outside somehow, and the door to my bathroom was now locked as well. It seemed that I had no choice but to call the police. Since my brother... I'm sorry, I lost my place, guys. Sorry, I lost my place. Seemed that I had no choice to call the police since my other family members were gone that night. It was the reason I could stay up so late to watch Adult Swim in the first place. When I hurriedly dialed the number, I accidentally dropped my cell phone and my cup of soda. I was very scared and had no choice but to finish the episode. I turned off all the lights in my room and got under the covers, hiding like my little brother does when I make him watch scary movies with me. I apparently had missed a little bit, but Gumball's parents were talking to Principal Brown again, so not that much. Nicole was asking him if Gumball was alright. Mainly since she hadn't remembered him when Principal Brown told her what happened to Doberman and Anais. He looked slightly confused and shocked for a moment, but Ben explained to her that he thought Gumball was sick today, and he had spent the day at home by himself with the stomach bug. Nicole screamed and wailed while Richard quietly told him in a very out-of-character voice that Gumball got on the bus this morning, but it didn't seem that way. The police were called once again to search the building in the small forest outside of Elmore. They had found him in Miss Simeon's classroom, hanging by a noose with a blood-covered knife behind him and blood covering his clothing. The episode ended with the shot of Gumball's dead body hanging there in the corner, fading to black. The credits rolled silently, not like the usual way Cartoon Network annoyingly airs a promo that squishes half the screen. These credits rolled unusually slow, and they weren't that fun to watch either. A little creepy, just plain white text, scrolling on a black background. I recognized Ben Boclet's name, since he was the creator of the show. The rest were people I'd never heard of. The copyright notice at the end said Cartoon Network Studios 2001, which was incredibly odd seeing as the show was new for 2011. After all that was over, the screen went to static for a split second, during which some incredibly shocking and creepy video clips were being played between static intervals. I can still remember them all very clearly. The first was a picture of a person in a plague doctor outfit. Those always scared me for some reason, and the way the person's suit was filmed was just as bad. A red light, something that freaks me out incredibly, and the way the person was shown over the clip. The next was a scene, like a video being played very quickly over and over, of a kitten's face being squished by a woman wearing high heels, which was strange because a so-called friend of mine sent me a picture yesterday of that exact thing, similar to the kitten in the video. The last one was that disturbed, and the most made me want to cry and vomit. Just my little brother, at least a small child who looked very similar to him, being shot in the face by a person who looked like my father. You could clearly see the child's brains and blood splatter on the wall. I began to sob uncontrollably after that clip, and so much that I passed out. When I woke up, my door was unlocked, and my TV was turned off. I went to call the police on the home phone in my kitchen, report that I'd seen some very disturbing things on TV. My doors had been locked. When they arrived, they could find nothing like that I remembered from early this morning. I told my brother about the episode, and he fainted. My internet history was even cleared. They were angry at me and just assumed that I had a bad nightmare, when I was sure I hadn't. Good thing I recorded the episode. The officers were so shocked at what I showed them. One of the officers felt bad for me and took me out to a small dinner so I could recollect my thoughts. At the dinner, I remember that my family was out visiting my aunt. They were supposed to be back by noon, and it was already 11, so the officer and I drove back, only to find a whole squad of police cars and even some government agents at my house. They explained to me that my little brother was missing and that my mother and father were major suspects. I was freaking out and trying to tell them about the disturbing clip of the boy who looked like my brother being shot in the head, but they wouldn't listen. I stayed with my older brother, who couldn't believe me either, still insisting that all he saw was an old Looney Tunes cartoon and nothing at all creepy or weird. The cops eventually told me they would contact the broadcasting and tell them about the incident. A representative of the broadcasting came to my cousin's house to talk to me in private about what I had seen and experienced that night. He was nice, but it all seemed a little like some sort of front. After I could tell him all I remembered, he agreed to play the day's programming from what the incident with the disturbing Gumball episodes that occurred. To my shock, all that was airing at the time was an old Looney Tunes short. Nothing more, nothing less. I hysterically sobbed and cried about what I had experienced and seen was completely real, but no one listened. Eventually I discovered that Booklet had a Twitter account, so I sent him a message about the episode. The reply I got: one thing. How in the heck did you find that? I never ever thought I would think that old shame again. Don't tell anyone. This Sarah, yes, that's my name. But the Amazing World of Gumball goes back further than you know. I used to have a really boring job as a teenager. I sketched little drawings of the Watersons and friends. The episode you saw was never supposed to be aired. It was supposed to be seen by anyone but me and a few friends of mine. It was a very, very awful thing to do, but we made the episode as a joke. A guy from my old job who everyone hated had lost a child to a crazy serial killer. Was apparently still out there somewhere. Anyway, we made it so we could have fun and make fun of the episode. He came to work crying like a fool, which is why you saw Mr. and Mrs. Watterson crying so much. I know I'm deeply sorry for what I did, which is why I tried to bury the stupid thing years ago. Luckily, I went out from the country with my friends and dug a hole and buried it. So, now for the explanation, what you've been waiting for, the clips at the end. I'm deeply sorry, but I don't know why those clips were aired. I'm sorry. I really am, but me and my friends are just the ones who made those scenes with Richard and Nicole crying. That's it. I'm so sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. Best wishes, Ben Booklet, everyone involved with the grieving. Seriously, stay the fuck away from that episode. Alright guys, well that's the end of the creepypasta. It was another bit of a long one too, 17 minutes, almost 18. But anyway, it's another famous one too, like so famous, almost as famous, if not more as, than Squidward Suicide, which you guys don't know. In one episode of The Amazing World of Gumball, they actually acknowledged the grieving. They didn't show the episode, they just acknowledged it, said you are about to watch the grieving or something. And it ended up being a joke, where they played a saxophone or something like that, something stupid. It's like how in SpongeBob, I haven't really been caught up with the new episodes, in SpongeBob season 12, I think is what they're on. There was an episode called SpongeBob in Random Land where they played what was supposed to be the picture of the evil Squidwards and stuff. One of the things I didn't really get was in all these creepypastas, oh, I tried to turn off the TV, or I tried to unplug it. Sometimes they don't try to unplug it, and I mean, why can't the guy just leave the room? Or the girl, apparently the person's name was Sarah in this story. But I would just leave the room if I was smart, and I never thought that usually those people would never get an explanation. They contacted the creator, and he actually told them what happened. Usually the creator would be like, I don't know what you're talking about, in most stories like this. But anyway, it was a pretty good creepypasta, a lot of gore and stuff. You can go on the site, there's a few pictures and shit of it. But anyway, thank you guys for listening to the creepypasta. Hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see all of you guys very soon.